I'm really trying to focus here, but there's so many sounds. Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I am deciding to do something easy because I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed in life. So we are going to be doing the Get to Know the Fantasy Reader book tag. This tag was created by a little bit Mads over here on YouTube, but it was adapted from Bree Hill's Get to Know the Romance Reader tag. So I'll link to both of those tags below if you are interested, and also list all the questions as well. So let's start off with the first question, which is, what is your fantasy origin story? I'm going to start with the fact that I had a children's version of the Bible. I don't know if I'll be able to find this version and post it on the screen, but this was like, we're going to give you little scenes that go with the words, and it also taught you how to read a little bit. So like, that was my introduction into fantasy. And then after that, I got really into the Magic Treehouse books. I don't know if y'all have read these. I believe it's two siblings who have a magic treehouse and they want to go and experience an event in history, and that's what they do. That's the book. Also, around the same time, I started to read The Chronicles of Narnia, and I will always say that is the series that got me into fantasy, because I just remember going into my parents' room and taking the first book and being like, what's this? And then I just read through all 7 books and had a fabulous time. So more accurately, The Chronicles of Narnia are the books that got me into fantasy. The second question is, if you could be the hero/heroine in a fantasy novel, who would be the author, and what's one trope you'd insist be in the story? This one was very easy on which author I wanted to write the story, which is Steven Erikson. He's the author that wrote the Malazan Book of the Fallen, which is my favorite series of all time. I did have an issue with what I wanted to be the trope because there's so many, and I kind of wanted to do the thing of like, well, I'll just be the hero. And then I was like, Erikson doesn't write stories like that though. And so what I know Erikson to be very good at is doing found family relationships, and so that would be the trope that I would want in my story, is that I would like to be part of a found family. Third question, what is a fantasy you've read this year that you want more people to read? This is January of 2026, so I have not read that many books yet. So I'm going to suggest a series that I read last year, the Dandelion Dynasty series by Ken Liu, starting with The Grace of Kings as the first book. I can't recommend this series enough, especially if you already enjoy adult high fantasy. You're going to enjoy this series so much. Apparently, people say that the first book is a little bit more difficult to get into than the rest of the series, and the rest of the books get better. I would argue they're pretty much all the same. I enjoyed every single one of them. I will say there's more characters in the later books and more diversity in the later books, but I feel like the first book is still a banger and you should read it. I've talked about this series recently in my last video because it's my favorite series and books to read in the year of 2025, but you're following a man who wants to tear down the current dynasty and in place of it put his own or anybody else's that's better. And so that's why it's called the Dandelion Dynasty. Question number 4, what is your favorite fantasy subgenre? What subgenre have you not read much from? So I had to do some digging on what subgenres there were in fantasy because I knew what my big ones were, but I had no idea what the rest were out there. I read epic and high fantasy the most. These are 2 different subgenres, which I didn't realize, but I should have. But I love epic stories and I love high fantasy. I want to be in a world where the chaos is magic and I don't know what's going on, but I love it. And I will learn everything later on. I don't care, just throw me in, I'll have a great time. When it comes to subgenres that I don't read enough of, there's a lot of subgenres I have read 0 books in, but I want to point out 2 specifically because this is about learning my taste in fantasy books. So it's also letting you know that if you've come to my page, I would like to let you know that I will not be reading urban fantasy or romantasy. The reason why urban fantasy is because I do not like having recognizable technology in my story when I'm in a fantasy. I can do it when it's like contemporary fiction. That's fine. That's easy for my brain to process. But if it comes into my fantasy story, it really puts me off. And then the other subgenre of romantasy, this is pretty straightforward. I'm not a huge romance person. I do enjoy a subplot or a minor plot of romance sometimes in my fantasy stories, but that's not what drives me to read stories in general. Someone else's story doesn't need romance in order for me to enjoy it or think it's really good. It can be a part of that, but it doesn't have to be. And so that's why romantasy is just never going to be an interest for me. Question number 5. Who is one of your auto-buy fantasy authors? So I gotta admit to something. I don't auto-buy any author unless the name is Steven Erikson or Ian C. Esselmont and they have written in the Malazan world. That is it. If I recognize an author's name and then I read the book summary and I'm like, oh, this is interesting, maybe I'll pick this up, it doesn't mean because the author was recognizable, I picked it up. It's because of the summary. It's because of the intrigue of what's in the story. I think authors can have a really great series and then other other books just don't work for me. I have such particular interests in fantasy that I know when I start reading a synopsis of a book and then I start to side eye a line that's said, I go, ooh, no, thank you. And that can be on any author. That could even be on Erickson or Esselmont's other books. That was a long-winded way to say I don't really do auto-buy author. Question number 6. How do you typically find fantasy recommendations? I typically find them through YouTube, TikTok, or blog posts. YouTube and TikTok, it's usually I am mutuals with people. I see their lists or I go looking for certain lists and I find books through that. But when it comes to blog posts, that's when I'm looking for something very niche. A lot of the time it's me trying to find authors that I'm like, I haven't read an author from this location, or I'm looking for an author that's in this subgenre that isn't white. With that search, I'm very happy there are people who still do blogs because those lists have helped me so much throughout the years and finding new books and finding incredible books. The other thing I will say too, sometimes just perusing a bookstore or perusing an online bookshop does also help too. That's how I found Necessary Fiction. Was I was just perusing the shop that I send the donation to through bookshop.org and they had recommended Necessary Fiction on there. So you'll never know what you find if you keep on digging. Question number 7. What is an upcoming fantasy release you're excited for? I am very excited for The Poet Empress by Shen Tao. I have had so many mutuals on TikTok get this arc, whether it was audiobook or physical, and have been raving about this story. Originally, it was pushed as romantasy with politics, but everyone who has read it has said the romance is like not even the most important thing. It's not really any part of the story. It really is the politics in this book that people are enjoying. And so I can't wait to pick it up. It's like coming out, I think, next week. If it's next week, I'm really excited. But I remember it either being the 20th or the 21st of January is coming out. So if you haven't heard about it, you should also check it out. Question number 8. What is one misconception about fantasy you would like to lay to rest? I don't know what misconceptions are out there anymore for fantasy. I feel like people nowadays are like fine with it, but I do feel like there's still some elitist readers that think you're wasting time if all you're doing is reading fiction/fantasy. And I don't know why they think you're wasting time. Fantasy is the best way for me to like disassociate from the world in a healthy way, and I don't know why that's wrong. The other thing is a lot of the themes in fantasy epics and high fantasy are a lot about politics, and if you just give a few more brain cells to thinking about it and like going more in depth of the themes that are brought up in certain series, you're going to get as much out of fantasy as you would a nonfiction book. And also there's historical fantasies, so like you can enjoy a historical period with also the fantasy setting if you want to. That sounds more fun than reading a history textbook or a history-centered nonfiction book. No offense, but those books are kind of dry, and I'd rather have more interesting characters and a little bit of pizzazz to the lines versus it being very literal. You know? It's just more fun. There's a car alarm going off, so if you can hear that, I do apologize. Question number 9. If someone had never read a fantasy before and asked you to recommend the first 3 books that come to mind as places to start, what would those recommendations be? I have very strong opinions on recommending books because I have had trouble recommending books for people. So I'm going to try to do this as best as possible. I really thought long and hard about the 3 books. There's one that I will always recommend as a series, but the other 2, I'm trying to like hit everybody's interests. That's the best I can say. The first series I would recommend is Between Earth and Sky by Rebecca Roanhorse. And the reason I would suggest this is 1, the world is inspired by pre-Columbian history. 2, I really like the magic system in here. It's a lot more simplified. And 3, the characters are very distinct. I also will say this is a series that reads very quickly. We also have some queer representation in this story, so I know a lot of people would like that as well. The next series I would suggest is the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. This series is historical fantasy. Sometimes I fight with that tag of historical on this book because Japan and China are not literally named in here, nor does it reference anything of our world, but it is referencing a specific war between China and Japan. So that's why historical is usually tagged onto the Poppy War series. What I will say about this book, this one is about war. So if you really want to see the perspective through a young woman, how war is handled and her feelings towards it and how she feels isolated, but at the same time heroic, you should read this series. Also, people need to stop saying this is romantasy. I don't know how romantasy was tagged onto the series at all. Is there a romance subplot? Yes, there is. Does it pertain to the actual plot of the story? Absolutely not. And it's heart-wrenching too, by the way, but it's not romantasy. This was done specifically to talk about war and how it affects people and the civilizations that endure it. It is not about romance. So those are 2 trilogies. This next one, though, we are bumping up to 4 books. The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne is the ultimate suggestion I will always give to someone who is interested or is leaning into fantasy more. This series has the best of everything. You want to learn how to read multiple POVs? This book series is for you. Do you want to learn on how to read battle scenes very well? This book is for you. Do you want a nice ending but also some catastrophe? This book is for you. Politics are in here, fighting is in here, love is in here, friendship is in here. It is the perfect all-rounder starter fantasy series. That's why I would recommend it to anybody who hasn't read adult high fantasy before, because John Gwynne nails it in its most simplest form. I would say that all of the series I've suggested and all of the books that I've brought up are simple and straightforward. None of them get to the point of confusion where you have to start writing notes because you have no idea what's going on, and none of them are going to throw ideas at you that won't get elaborated on later on in the story. So I do hope that one of these 3 series I suggested would be interesting to somebody and they would work out for them as well. Question number 10 is, who is the most recent fantasy reading content creator you came across that you'd like to shout out? I wouldn't say this person is the most recent, but this person has said they're going to start posting more on YouTube, so I wanted to shout them out. It's Masha. I met her over on TikTok. She's a mutual of mine, and so I'm going to shout her out here. You should go check out her content. We have very similar tastes when it comes to fantasy, and she's posted a lot of her TikToks into shorts over here, but hopefully soon she'll be posting some long form content. Okay, that is it for this book tag. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know any of your answers to these questions down below. Also, I know people usually tag people for these videos. If you've watched this video, you're tagged. And with that, I'm going to end the video here. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!